When we ponder over these things, we begin to perceive how feeble in their self-assertive violence and how confusing in their misleading distinctness are the words that we use. We begin also to perceive that the limitations we impose on the Brahman arise from a narrowness of experience in the individual mind, which concentrates itself on one aspect of the unknowable and proceeds forthwith to deny or disparage all the rest. We tend always to translate too rigidly what we can conceive or know of the Absolute into the terms of our own particular relativity. We affirm the one and identical by passionately discriminating and asserting the egoism of our own opinions and partial experiences against the opinions and partial experiences of others. It is wiser to wait, to learn, to grow. And since we are obliged for the sake of our self-perfection to speak of these things which no human speech can express, to search for the widest, the most flexible, the most Catholic affirmation possible, and found on it the largest and most comprehensive harmony. Now, having stated this basic position of harmony, Sri Aurobindo points out that, I'll take you straight to the last paragraph, because that gives the final conclusion of this chapter. We start then with the conception of an omnipresent reality, of which neither the non-being at the one end nor the universe at the other are negations that annul. They are rather different states of the reality, obverse and reverse affirmations. The highest experience of this reality in the universe shows it to be not only a conscious existence, but a supreme intelligence and force, and a self-existent bliss. That is Satchidananda. And beyond the universe, it is still some other unknowable existence, some utter and ineffable bliss. Therefore, we are justified in supposing that even the dualities of the universe, when interpreted not as now by our sensational and partial conceptions, but by our liberate intelligence and experience, will also be resolved into those highest terms. While we still labor under the stress of the dualities, this perception must no doubt constantly support itself on an act of faith, but a faith with the highest reason, the widest and most patient reflection, do not deny, but rather affirm. This creed is given indeed to humanity to support it on its journey, until it arrives at a stage of development when faith will be turned into knowledge, and perfect experience and wisdom will be justified of our works. Reality as at once static and dynamic and beyond. The reality as the originator of the world. The reality as the Satchidananda. Manifesting in the cosmic systems, not only one, but cosmic systems. This is the starting point and the basic premise of the life divine. Now, there is one important element which is still yet not fitted into this conception of omnipresent reality, and that is the individual. Where does the individual fit into this totality? Now, this is one of the most difficult problems, and a question is often asked, what is the destiny of the individual? Since we have time, I will take up this chapter number 5 so that this very important question receives some answer. Actually speaking, 5, 6 and 7, all the 3 chapters deal with the same problem, but essentially this chapter gives a basic answer to the question. Now let me first of all state the essential problem of the truth of individuality. Normally we experience the individual within a certain limitation. That limitation is called by one term, ego. Every individual has some kind of what is called self-experience. It is one of the data of our psychological life. One doesn't know how, but something happens in the working of our consciousness, and there is this, what is called self-experience. One basic thing that nobody can deny is the experience that one constantly experiences. There is, as it were, a current of experience going on in each one of us. Of course, during sleep, you don't have the experience. But as soon as the experience becomes conscious, not that in sleep there was no experience at all, but there is no consciousness of the experience. And as soon as the experience begins to be had, the idea of the self is conjoined with it. It is by an effort that you can withdraw yourself from the experience, but normally experience and the self-experience is constantly going on inextricably. This experience is the starting point of our journey of life. A child too begins to weave whatever personality the child can weave out of this basic stuff of self-experience. Now this self-experience has 3 characteristics. One is that it tends to identify this self-experience with whatever happens to one's body. And one feels as if I means this, all that is here in the body. Secondly, there is a tendency to move out of oneself and to see the other one as distinguished from oneself, and this distinction is greatly affirmed by the limitations and the contours of our body. Everything that falls outside this body, I feel is the other. Thirdly, whatever is the other is grasped at by what I consider to be myself. There is a constant tendency to grasp at the other and to bring it nearer to oneself, to experience it and to possess it and even to be identified with it. In a sense, we might say that there is an inalienable experience of the self, not only as self-identified with the body, but self-understood in distinction with the other, and thirdly, with an effort to grasp the other and to amalgamate that other within myself. This is our basic experience, self-experience. Now, why is it that there is this experience of the other? And why is it that there is a tendency to grasp and to possess it? There are no metaphysical answers given as yet in most of the philosophical systems. In fact, the egoistic consciousness has not been defined and analyzed very, very minutely. In 2 chapters of this book, Aurobindo describes the ego and self-experience in quite a great detail. There are 2 chapters here in the Life Divine. If you open chapter number 9. Chapter number 8 and 9 of the second volume. Memory, self-consciousness, and the ignorance. And the next chapter is memory, ego, and self-experience. In these 2 chapters, Sri Aurobindo has analyzed and put the ego experience, self-experience, which takes place in the field of ignorance. That is to say, if there was no ignorance, ego would never be experienced. We are all, as it were, born in ignorance. Right from birth, we are ignorant beings all the time, looking around. And looking around with an impulsion that seems to be automatic within us of the self-experience. It is on self-experience that the ego is built. And sometimes we even feel that the ego is built by memory, which is not the case, but because of ego there is a memory, you might say. Because there is an ego consciousness going on, the memory gets built up. There is a theory which says memory is the man. And if memory is gone, man is gone. And that is very often true. If I forget what I was in the past and what I am, if I can't connect myself with the past and the present, my personality seems to be shattered. This is what happens in schizophrenia and split personality and so on. But as against that, it is also true that most of us have forgotten our childhood, and yet we continue to be what we are. So it is not as if memory is such an indispensable element. There are experiences where, for example, a robber called Valmiki, he was Ratna, the robber, he becomes suddenly transformed into a saint. There is no connection between his past personality and a new personality is framed. Even if he remembers, he is now a different personality. So to say that memory is the man is not psychologically entirely inevitable. The important point is that there is a sense of ego. And this ego sense is based upon self-experience. And there is a building of this ego. And this ego is a kind of a coordinating agency. There is normally a small field given to us in our experience. Now, in this small field of experience, the elements are all pell-mell given to us. Egoistic consciousness coordinates. Even if you see the child, all the experiences around the child, the attempt is to coordinate them. And this effort at coordination is by this machinery called ego consciousness. So, a small little machine which is coordinating and which is identifying itself with all that is coordinated is the egoistic consciousness. And this experience of the ego may be defined as a limited state of consciousness which coordinates various experiences and which is constantly engaged with the grasping of something that it considers to be other than itself and building up as large a universe as possible. This is the domain of the egoistic consciousness. It wants, if at all possible, it wants to embrace the whole universe. And that is why the greatest egoistic human beings have tried to conquer the whole world. Their egoism is never satisfied, not fulfilled, unless the whole world is possessed. There is a connection between the small little